And now a message from our friends at Fetching Food.
The 1970s and 80s had Elbow, Gravy Train, Purina, Meow Mix, and Bell Bottoms. You've changed your clothes, now change how you feed your pet. Like Bell Bottoms, kick the kibble and join us in the 21st century with the healthiest diet for dogs and cats. Feed naturally, feed raw, feed Fetching Foods.
I was looking in the lab late one night when my eyes beheld an eerie sight. For my monster from his slab began to rise and send away to my surprise. He did the monster mash. He did the mash, the monster mash. The monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. He did the mash. It caught on in a flash. He did the mash, the monster mash. Swirl from the laboratory in the castle east. Swirl to the master bedroom with a vampire feast. The ghouls all came from their humble abode to get a joke from my retro. He did the mash, the monster mash. The monster mash. It was a graveyard smash. The monster mash. It caught on in a flash. The monster mash. Whoa. Have a happy Halloween.
Bring me to the model, baby. Let the magic begin. Who are you, baby?
Hello, pups and kittens, and welcome to another fun-filled and informative episode of the Groomer Next Door Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Green, and joining us for the very first time, I cannot believe I'm saying this, for the very first time, we have a photographer on the podcast. We are joined this week by Shannon McFarland. She has an amazing company called Slobbered Lens, and she will be talking to us all about photography and more in just a moment. But before then, let's go into our fact of the week. Because we're talking about photography, I thought, you know what, it'd be interesting to learn a little bit about, the origin or fun facts about it. The first photographic paper was made of asphalt. Interesting. More precisely, asphalt varnish was applied on the copper or the glass plate. Very interesting. I did not know that. Kodak, you've come a long way.
Say it again. Blah, blah, blah.
I don't say blah, blah, blah.
Well, by that sound, Shannon is about to enter the podcast studio. So with that said, welcome Shannon McFarland, Slobbered Lens, to the podcast.
Oh, hello. Hold on a sec. Dad, we have a guest on the podcast.
All right, this week on the podcast, we have an amazing photographer, and I'm looking so forward to learning more about what she's doing and more about her. We have Shannon McFarland of Slobbered Lens, and I love the name, by the way. I didn't even say that beforehand. On the podcast, thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. I mean, seriously. I honestly don't know if I've ever had a photographer on the podcast. I can't remember. So you may be the first.
Are you kidding? In 250 episodes you haven't had a photographer on?
I don't think I have. I know,
wow,
right?
Okay. Well, this better be really good.
Well, no pressure. No pressure at all.
Right. Right. There's no precedent, so.
Well, tell us your origin story, because you know how I love learning about people, and I love finding out how did they get started in photography or whatever they're into. So tell us how you got started.
My journey with photography, at least my most recent one, started in 2007. It was a while ago. And that was the year that our very first Great Dane died. And we had cared for him for about 18 months after he received a chronic active hepatitis diagnosis. And so he was, when your liver stops working, you get pretty sick. And he was my heart dog. And so we had all of these adventures together, and I had snapshots of him. Digital cameras were pretty well established already by that time, and I had film photography from when he was younger, but I didn't have anything that was really compelling except for a few things here and there. And after he died, I really felt that, because I would look back at the photographs and I would think, oh gosh, I absolutely remember this moment and I feel so connected to it. And I just wish this photograph were better, because if it were, then I'd put it up on my wall so I could see it every day. And because it's blurry, or because it's too dark, or, all the things that we criticize ourselves about, I just keep it in this box and I don't get to see it as often. So it was, was it 2 months after he died that I bought what I call my first real camera, an SLR, and started diving into learning about how to do that, how to master the physics of light and the exposure triangle and how to compose shots and all of that stuff, thinking that I don't ever want to feel like I'm missing this opportunity again. I want to be able to say some of these things and look back on them later and feel like I have a really accurate likeness that's not blurry or otherwise distracting. And that's where it started. It was 2 years after that I decided to open this photography business. And my first photography business was all about animals. People talked me into photographing people as well, which I did for a couple of years and didn't like as much. When you go to a photography class and the teacher says something like, well, children and animals, those are the most difficult subjects because they're unpredictable and they're moving and all of these other things. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, adults, no, they're not as interesting to me. So I will take the kids and the dogs and the cats and the horses any day. But it's grown from there, and I moved on to being with all kinds of animals at all ages, and I realized that as we were experiencing things in our family, that I had a much greater appreciation for the end of life. And so my photography now is exclusively for families that live with animals who are in the end of life. And it doesn't mean that they're on death's door. It could just mean that they're living and loving a lab who is 10 or 12 years old and still has a lot of oomph, but is 10 or 12 years old. And so is getting closer to the time where his body stops working and he dies. Sometimes these animals also have some significant medical concerns. Some of them have things like organ failure, cancer, neurological damage, that kind of stuff. The things that maybe other photographers don't want to deal with because they take more time or they're not beautiful. And that's really where my heart is. It's with the underdog and honoring this incredible life that they have, and that as humans, and we know that we're going to outlast our animals, at least in most cases, that being able to give them something to help them as they're continuing to go forward in their lives, that they don't have the experience that I had where they're looking through their old stuff and thinking, I love this picture and I hate this picture because it's not as clear as I want it to be, or those kinds of things. So that's where all that came from.
When you said 2007, that's the first thing that caught me, is the fact that you're like, a while back ago, and like 2007 was like a couple years ago. I mean, I've said this so many times. I'm like, oh yeah, that was 11 years ago.
Like a decade and some.
I mean, I look at my daughter and I go, oh yeah, that's right. You were born in 2008. Oh, wait, is that like 3 days ago? I mean,
It's
seriously.
remarkable.
And, the second part to that is it's so hard to believe the limitations that we have time with our furry friends. And for a lot of people, that is their child. Whether it's they just don't have time to settle down for a family, their career is just pushing them, they're just not compatible with people, which honestly, I do grasp that at some point.
Yes.
So that's always a negative, unfortunately. And then there's just the fact of and unable to actually have a child, and there's just such a need for your dog or cat, and of course a cat will live a lot longer than a lot of dogs, unfortunately, and you want to capture that. You want to capture that time because it's, I'll tell you, my first camera before cell phones, actually, and this is for anybody who doesn't realize this, but before the cell phone had a camera, I used to buy those box cameras that were disposable, and that was fine.
Yes.
And they actually were really good. I was shocked on how good they were. I actually bought a digital camera, and I couldn't believe that the actual box disposables were better than a digital camera. Figure that out. So I was just thinking to myself, the low lights and contrast, and even being able to take digital now and be able to put filters in and highlight it. Of course, we didn't have these options just back even in 2007. I mean, it was still, maybe camera phones had, 3 megapixels at most, if you were lucky.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I could see where it was challenging. But why is it that it's always the same reason to start whatever it is? It's always started by my dog, my cat, and that was the reason. I mean, almost 250 episodes. It seems like it's always that. I mean, this podcast started because of rescuing a dog. So, we put so little. I mean, I'll take that back. The people who love their animals don't, but the others put so little stock in dogs, cats, horses, goldfish, birds, that they're just property. They're just animals. And yet, I've got tons of stories that reflect different. They say, hey, look, these dogs, these cats, these horses, these goldfish, these birds, they actually made my life. They made me a better person. Mm-hmm. They gave me a career. I mean, who would ever think that? That is just, ponder it. It's crazy. And I can understand, you're really capturing the essence of what I talk about, which is the unfortunate south side of having a pet, where they do have chronic problems, or they do have the age, which unfortunately is against them, and you're giving pet parents that moment. It's like, here, I'm capturing them and their soul for you, so it's not going to be that dim look. It's not going to have flaws that you're not going to be proud of. And of course, cell phone cameras, they're not as good as a good camera. So you're capturing that for people, and it's like, again, you just even said it, where other people won't do it because it takes the time, or they don't have the patience, or they don't want to be around it because it's just too hard to deal with. And you figured, hey, you know what? These pet parents, they deserve to have this. They deserve to be able to have that moment captured, and I'm giving it to them. That's so cool. And you do it every day, probably thinking of your very first great day that brought it all to you. That's pretty cool. That's really cool.
I think he's such a big part of my work to this day. There's so many influences that I have from him, and that's one of the best things about these relationships, is that death does not end them. We carry, as you mentioned, these creatures with us through the rest of our lives because they shape who we are. Mm-hmm. And we know that. Sometimes it's hard to realize that, But I think having the tangible reminder that we can see on a daily basis is so tremendously helpful.
And the personalities. I mean, they're vibrant. They're honest. And they're not so easily offended either. It's just, you can have a conversation with a dog or cat or even a horse. You can have that conversation and it's pure. Where again, you can go to the market and see somebody you know and it might not be a good conversation or it might be fake. And humans just, we've lost the art of being able to communicate, truthfully. And that drives me insane. I can have a better conversation with a dog.
I think that humans have so many hang-ups around the issue of vulnerability.
Yeah.
That they aren't willing to make themselves vulnerable to really be emotionally present with someone, whether that person is experiencing joyful emotions or ones that are angry or desperate or frustrated or sad. And it's when we protect ourselves that way, when we wall ourselves off, it is so difficult to develop the relationship. And with our animal family, that's just not an issue. There is such a freedom of exchange between the two sides, and it's seamless. It just happens because we each inherently trust the other with our secrets, with our feelings. We know that there's no judgment in the relationship. So we can feel free to be ourselves. And with humans, that feels very threatening sometimes to think about that.
It's shocking. It's like Pandora's box was never opened for dogs, cats, or any kind of animals.
Yeah.
You kind of wish that you could go back to that moment in time where it's like, I'm not going to, and I get it. We all have our insecurities. So, of course, we're going to have to put something up, some kind of wall. Dogs and cats, they're just like, dude, I'm here. Like me, don't like me. Just don't abuse me. So strange.
Today's a new day. Let's have an adventure.
Yes, right? Let's go for a walk. I mean, it could be the same walk we've taken 100 times. It's still new to me. That's what also makes it fun. Go for a walk with your dog and look at their eyes the whole time. They can walk that same path 100 times, 1,000 times. It doesn't matter. It's still brand new to them. Can you imagine that?
Always something different.
Oh.
Yeah, if we could be in, as the Buddhists say, beginner's mind all the time, that is a very, very dog-like state. Maybe not so much a cat-like state, but definitely a dog-like state.
I mean, a cat's like, hey, you know what? I haven't slept on this side of the house before, or if I have, I forgot. But even at that, it's still very comforting.
You put a new piece of paper down here on this table. I think I'll sit on it.
I think with my cats are like, ooh, look, there's something on the counter. Let's knock it down. Whoever knocks it down first gets a prize.
Yes.
But you know what? That's what makes it so fun. And that's kind of what all of it comes down to, is diving into the expressions of what these really unique people, because honestly with me, I look at animals as being people and people being animals. And in the term itself, I look at them and I'm always amazed. If I'm having a bad day, it's because of the human side. It's not because of having a bad dog or a bad cat. It's a human that just ticked me off, which oddly enough, it doesn't really take much for a human to just frustrate me, because I figure they know better. A dog and cat, if they don't want their paws touched, they don't want to get a bath, I get that. But for the most part, they're just so like, ooh, it's a good day.
Mm-hmm.
So, biggest challenge in photographing any kind of animal, whether it's dog, cat, bird, fish, whatever it is, what is the most difficult challenge you have faced so far?
Are you looking for a technical challenge or more of a holistic challenge?
Whatever seems to work for you. It's your story.
The holistic challenge is honestly the human side of the equation. Because the style that I do is not posed or propped or anything like that. It's very natural. I insist on being where the animal is comfortable. And for cats, sometimes that's under the bed, especially if there's a stranger in the house. We'll use the time that it takes to get everybody comfortable and settled so we can see what looks like normal behavior for that animal. And there are many times that the humans will interject themselves because they want to help and they want things to go really smoothly, and they think, well, if I just move this one thing, and it winds up creating another layer of anxiety for the animal because now there's this person coming in and fussing with them a little bit. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, your ear is turned back and it needs to be forward, or your collar is crooked, or here, put this ball in your mouth and hold it. Okay, now hold it. Wait, you dropped it. No, pick it back up again. Okay, hold it. Hold it. It's that kind of stuff. And it's just like with people, when people are being photographed and they're waiting to hear the shutter click, and they're being told, well, you need to lower your chin, or turn your head this way a little bit, or drop your shoulders. It doesn't feel very natural, and consequently, most people don't like looking at photographs of themselves because they look different. They look different because someone told them to be different. And with animals, I think it's so much of the same way. When they're just left to their own devices and I follow them around, then that part goes away. So there's so much about being able to communicate with the humans effectively and explain to them in advance that this is how this works best. And if you have particular things that you want to include, let's talk about those now so we can figure out how to incorporate them without making a big kerfuffle about it. So we can plan to move through things and make it flow very naturally rather than having you think of something and then rushing into the frame to drop it off and then trying to give your dog direction. And it's just, that can be cumbersome. It doesn't happen often, but it is I've talked with a lot of photographers that think working with animals means that they don't need to work with people, and that is absolutely not true. You have to be able to do both.
Yeah. I would think that it would be really challenging to, in a sense, decipher what a pet parent is really looking for. Because, again, they may want that, I want the ball to be half in their mouth as they're playing, but I want that pretty pose. It's almost to the point where I would think that some would be almost unrealistic, where capturing them in their element. That's the real challenge. So
yes, and those are the pictures that people gravitate to later, the ones where there's life happening. I do a pretty lengthy interview before I show up with any camera equipment, and we talk about, I want to give the family the opportunity to interview me to see if I'm a good match. But I also want to talk with them about what they have in mind, what their relationship is like, how they became a family, how they would describe their animal family member, what kinds of things they've learned from that animal. How has your life changed? All of those kinds of things, because that's the stuff that they're going to hold on to in memory. That's the stuff that I need to figure out how to reflect to them in a photograph.
Understandable.
And so it's me being able to draw out of them what is going to help them the most 15 years from now, when they're really leaning on these photographs as a connection point, an anchor. Because if I ask them, well, what are you expecting or what do you want? I get blank stares because they don't know and they aren't able to articulate that. So it's been a really interesting process of being able to refine some of that initial communication so that I can lead them along the way. And as they're telling me this stuff, I'm making notes and I'm getting ideas and I'm looking around in their home and I'm seeing the places that appear to be most important to both of them. You know, where does the sleeping usually happen? What kinds of things do you do during the day? What about foods? Let's talk about foods. What kinds of things are going on there? You know, so it's more of it is a really holistic approach. It's not just me showing up with a camera and spending 45 minutes behind the lens and calling it a day.
Makes sense. I mean, at least it's not one of those, all right, we're going to do this for 10 minutes and all of it. Because, you know, again, there is the rushed, well, we got it. And then there's the, I need to catch that essence. I have to get that moment. And by doing that interview process, by being able to really dive into it, that's probably the biggest key to the success.
I think so, because this is a really intimate space. To have someone come into your home or go with you to a park or on a bucket list type of trip or whatever it is that is the center of the photography session, you know, you're opening your life up, and that's a lot to show somebody that you don't know. So part of this is just being comfortable with each other, but it really is about me understanding what is going to be the greatest benefit to this person. So not necessarily what the person wants to see, but what that person needs to see in the short term and needs to see in the longer term. Because I've been doing this long enough now that I'm pretty good at anticipating that.
Which always helps. I mean, with
It
time,
does, yes.
with time does, you know, you would hope that lesson has been taught. Doesn't always has, but it's one of those. Now, let's go to the opposite end of the spectrum. Now, we started with the most challenging. What's the easiest part?
Oh, the easiest part is, I think, just developing the relationship with that. You know, because I'm sure, like a lot of people who listen to your podcast and some of your guests, that I am the human that goes to the park and sees the same human-dog pairing multiple times a week and remembers every detail about the dog and doesn't remember very much about the human. Whether it's, you know, the dog park or the park or the beach or whatever. For me, building the connection with the animal is the easiest thing to do. It's just, I know right where I stand. I know if I need to give more space or more time. I know if the connection is more of a intense kind of physical touch connection or if it's more of an intellectual kind of connection. And I can adjust my behavior and my approach accordingly. But they're so clear in communicating, and it's being able to listen to that and be responsive to it has become second nature. So that's absolutely the easiest part.
Did you ever think that learning how to communicate with animals was going to be so easy? Because it's something I'm trying to teach my daughter, that it's really easy to communicate. She looks at me and she goes, how do you communicate with them? And I go, I don't need Rosetta Stone to actually learn how to talk to dogs and cats. I just need to learn to listen. And
listening is that's the key.
That's it. It's listening. I mean, the language is so simplistic and yet overlooked by so many. And that's what shocks me. I can't, some people, and this will be maybe a little bit of a surprise, it's hard for me to communicate with some people, to find that ground, to find that conversation, because people are very, very complicated. And sometimes you just can't get in there and you can't decipher what works. But with a dog or cat, oh, it's easy. Yeah, I can have a full-on conversation. I mean, I might look like a crazy person to the untrained eye, but truth is, I probably am. Thing is that I know what the dogs and cats, what they're trying to tell you, and it's so simple. And I would think that would be, and by picking apart what you were saying, that's the easy part. What they want and what they're telling you, that's really easy. It's really trying to figure out what the pet parent wants. That's got to be the difficult side.
That is absolutely right. On both sides, it comes down to being able to see and recognize individuals and being willing to adjust what I do and what I practice to accommodate what that individual needs, whether it's a chicken or a 7-year-old girl or an adult. It doesn't matter. Everybody is different. Everybody is entitled to have personal space. Everybody's entitled to be touched in a way that feels good or not touched at all, or all of those kinds of things. And so being able to listen and to honor that is absolutely critical. And there's so many photographers that I see that don't give themselves space to do that because they're cramming in a lot of shooting time in a short period. Maybe they have back-to-back sessions in a day, and they may or may not have a consultation beforehand to talk about things. And I've done that before, and I can tell you that my product wasn't terrible, and it lacked connection. I mean, I could look at a photograph and say, this is technically beautiful, and yet there's a soul connection that's missing here somehow. I wasn't listening. I wasn't present. I wasn't paying attention. And so I've changed that, especially now that I'm working with families that are experiencing pretty high levels of stress in many cases. They're going through hospice, or they're going through oncology treatment, or one of their animals just had a leg amputated, and so they're doing wound care, and then they're learning how to adjust with 3 legs instead of 4. I don't put a time limit on things, and I schedule just one family a day so that I can really be there. And I'm not looking at my watch thinking about how far I have to drive for my next appointment and how soon that's coming up and how I'm going to gracefully exit. I can really just relieve myself of that pressure and give fully to that family.
See, that's really, in so many ways, that is every ounce of anything media, and yet it's overlooked. You got to be able to focus on the persons in front of you and not the ones that are coming up next. And that takes time. Yeah,
people don't want to give. They just try to fit more into a small space.
Mm-hmm. And what happens? It's the same thing. It doesn't matter whether you're doing a still shot or it's something that's a larger picture. If it's rushed, you don't connect. And that's the thing. Mm-hmm. It's like, we were talking about it before. I've listened to shows of whether it's big name shows, or I'll watch TV or see movies, and you can always tell what's rushed. It's just by looking at it. It's like, well, you could have planned that out a lot better if you would have just taken the time instead of just getting the shots or getting that segment done. You could have just taken a little bit of time just to focus on it instead of just going right through it. It drives me nuts.
And it feels like there's an agenda behind it, too.
Yeah.
The person came in with this preconception that these were going to be the important things to cover and wasn't really flexible on that. And so maybe something shifts and that person that's doing the work, whatever kind of work it is, isn't moving with that circumstance. And so there's this weird rigidity that happens where all of the really beautiful, lovely stuff that's happening spontaneously isn't being acknowledged or honored because it didn't fit what was on the agenda.
And it comes out. it doesn't matter if it's an audio, it doesn't matter if it's still, it doesn't matter if it's video. You can see right there what's been rushed.
Yep.
I don't understand, and especially with such a high def type of world that we're in now. I mean, just go back 11 years, you're talking less megapixels, you're talking about less quality in audio, you're talking about less quality in video, and yet you could probably get away with it. Maybe 11 years ago. You can't get away with it anymore. It's almost impossible, and yet those shortcomings are right there. These shortcuts, very easy, and yet I can only imagine in your perspective when you look at anything in print, and you probably look at it and go, yeah, you could have done so much better if you would have just taken the time.
Well, I'm a recovering human. I'm a human recovering from judgmental ways. So I can't think of a better way to say that. So I do try not to do that. And I teach a lot of photographers photography, and I also teach a lot of families about how to document their own lives so that maybe they can afford to hire me once or twice, but they're looking at documenting a whole lifetime. And so I want to be able to show them how to do that themselves. And what's become more natural to me now since I started teaching is that looking for the opportunities and linking them to solutions or different things to try has been so much more valuable than me just looking at something and judging it, because that's really where I want to go first, to be very honest. So it's been a good exercise for me to expand my mind and my heart that way and say, well, I'm looking back on my work from 3 years ago, from 5 years ago, from 10 years ago, definitely, and seeing all of the things that I was doing my very best at because that's what I knew how to do. And yet compared to where I am today, I think, wow. I mean, look at me. Look at how far I've come because I'm continuing to grow. And so I'm just hopeful that other people are seeing the same things in their own stuff, not that they're comparing them to what other people are doing, but they're looking back and saying, yeah, I really see a difference. When I started this, I was rushing through things and I wasn't connecting. And 2 years later, I mean, look at these two. They're like night and day, and it's the same photographer, maybe even the same animal, and it's a world of difference.
It's funny that you say that, because I'll look back on some of the episodes I've done, and I'm like, oh, God, that's so crappy. I was so bad at it. Please don't look back to those years. And yet I can look at my own stuff and go, oh, gosh, or even down to the simple artwork. I'll look at it and go, yeah, I should have done it this way. More critical on myself, and I'm gonna take that wild step. You're the same way. You look back on your own stuff and go, man, if only I would have done X, Y, Z different, or I would have known this. For example, I would pretty much always fly by the seat of my pants when it came to an interview. I had no prep done at the early stages because I just wanted it to be real. But in reality, that's really not the logistics behind it. You really should have a lot more information before you go. Now, of course, it's a lot more research and making sure I have everything done. And I'll look and I'll go, oh, I bet those sounded awful, because I was playing with the moment where you don't want to do that. But at the time, what are you going to do? That's what you thought was the right move, and then you learn. But if you don't learn,
exactly,
a lot of people don't. And that's probably where you're benefiting so many photographers by saying, hey, this is what I used to do, and this is what I learned not to do. So that's got to be helpful.
Yeah, and the practice that I use most often, especially when I'm teaching families who don't consider themselves to be photographers, that making a connection with them emotionally about the photographs that they produce or the images, because I shoot mostly film, so I say photograph a lot because it's photograph. But most everybody else is shooting digital, so they say images or pictures or whatever. But making an emotional connection with them about what it is that they've created. And then talking through that part. How do you feel when you look at this? And how did you hope that you might feel when you were behind the lens and composing it? Because that's really important. And so if you can figure out how to define that, we can work through the technical stuff that will help you make that happen. And that has been it's a more effective approach for almost everyone, because it first encourages them to make that connection and to have intention. Those are the two key things that I teach in photography, intention and connection. You have to have that before you do anything else. The technical stuff just comes in to fill that in. It's supporting stuff. And you can have a photograph with beautiful connection and beautiful intention that is technically imperfect and still totally knock it out of the park. Maybe it's a little blurry. Maybe it's not quite in the right part of the frame. Maybe it's overexposed. None of that really matters so much as that when you look at it, that you feel that thing that you really wanted to feel. And so being able to teach people that photography is not just about how to master the exposure triangle and to do everything correctly in manual mode, because it's not, that they can see that, oh, this is accessible to me because I have emotions and I'm connected to this beautiful, amazing creature that's holding down my sofa over there. So this is possible for me. And I think that goes for the professional photographers too. So often we in the industry forget that this is an emotional product that we're producing. It's not just about the sharpness of focus or the depth of field or any of that other jargony stuff that we talk about when we're with photographer people.
Do you think that in such a highly production day and age that we're in, expectations have risen? Or do you think that it's exactly where it was in 2007?
Expectations of how the photographs are supposed to be?
Yeah, I mean, with the change of filters and different apps that are out there, and just the way that photographs have changed over just the last 10 years, and the way that we're able to tweak different things, are people's expectations, have they changed to kind of want something that's a little bit more studio grade, that's high grade, or is it really just the same thing with people?
Oh, this is such an interesting question, because the heart of this issue is technology and how technology advances. And being able to bring a higher level of technology to more people so that it's more accessible is a really wonderful thing. The trouble is that people equate that higher level of technology with a higher level of compatibility with the user. So a camera on your phone can create a museum quality photograph, and there have been entire gallery shows dedicated to iPhone photography. When you know how to create the photograph that you want to create. If you have a top of the line professional camera that's totally tricked out with every bell and whistle that you could ever want to have, and you don't know how to create a compelling photograph, you might as well just use the camera phone. Mm-hmm. Because you're going to have to go through so many frames to happen upon something that's decent. And it's not because of the camera, it's because of the user. So there's an expectation that with the technology that's available that anybody can be a photographer. And there are a lot of people out there that are hustling to prove that because they go out into the market with their equipment and really wonderful intentions. And yet, while they're learning and they're studying and they want to be better, they haven't yet invested the time that they need to be able to reliably deliver for a client. And photography is not a by chance kind of thing. You have to learn how to anticipate, and you have to have the technical stuff to be able to back that up. So it's not blowing through 300 frames and then being excited that you have 5 of them that are decent. It's being able to shoot 2 rolls of 36 film and then go back to the client with 20 knock their socks off photograph proofs that they're so good that they can't decide which ones they want. That's where it happens. And so I do think the expectation is that having a better camera can make all the difference. Like when I'm photographing an event and somebody will come up and say, wow, that's a really nice camera. I bet it takes great pictures. You say, nope, but I do. You know, computers don't write best-selling novels, and paintbrushes don't create incredible masterpieces. It's all about the person that's using them.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's what's funny about it is that nobody understands that it's really about putting it together. That's why I think what this whole conversation for me is kind of like a geek out moment, is because you're creative, and being able to talk to somebody who's creative, it's another major passion of mine. So coming up and kind of bouncing off the walls of, there's a little bit of insanity, of course, that goes with creativity, and to say the least.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not normal people, that's for sure, but it's all about landscape. It's all about your subject, and it's so much that goes into it that can almost be, in a sense, neurotic, where you're just kind of going, okay, that's just not a good background. We need a better background. Their subject is perfect. I mean, this is a gorgeous golden retriever, but the background, it doesn't work. And, and, you know, I think a lot of people miss that. They don't see it. I mean, you have a gorgeous main objective that you want to show off in that photo. But if you're just in this mundane area that doesn't pop, what's the point? But again, going back to, well, you know, looking at the clock, I got another client coming up, you will rush through it and not worried about that landscape. And landscape, it may be a byproduct, but it's so important, and nobody gets that. That's another reason why you can go back, and I'm sure, again, you can go back and look at a million different photos, whether it's in a magazine or wherever, and go, yeah, you had the right subject, and I understand we want the eyes to see that. But what's in the background just doesn't fit the whole thing. I can't imagine. So, you know, yes, you're right. Cameras do a great job. There's a great deal of software out there. But if the person who's operating it doesn't figure this out, it doesn't work. So I totally get it.
Right. Yeah, buying the fanciest pair of shears and razors and cables and all of that stuff, it doesn't mean that you're ready to open your own grooming salon. There's a lot more to it, and I think that photography has become, in so many places, it's become a commodity rather than an art, because there's so many people that are selling sessions for $50, and you get 382 digital images that have been edited with your 3-hour session. It's just crazy.
Yes.
And it does feel very much like a commodity. And for me, my business model is very different. And I don't want to do business with people that are looking for digital files, because I know for me, it's important to be able to create something and see it in print, because that's what I want in my life. I want to be able to walk through my home and be surrounded by images of family members that mean a lot to me and that have been the most remarkable relationships in my life. I want to have a space for all of that space that's been filled up in my heart. I think needs to have a space on the wall. And I want to see that.
And you want to put that out there with your product. When it comes, if it's a Slobbered Lens product, it's going to be that. It's not going to just be a rush right through. Okay, well, we got the shot, but could we have done better? No, you want to make sure you're capturing. You want to capture the soul. You don't want to just capture the moment.
Right.
Yeah, I get that. I mean,
it's also the little things too, the details, like the funny little freckles and the patches on the belly and particular curve of the tail and whiskers and how one ear is up and one ear is down, and those little things that after death happens, we think that we're going to remember those things forever and ever and ever. And we don't. It starts to fade, and we feel like we're losing them all over again. So being able to connect people with that part of the visual memory, so that, hey, no worries, I have this covered. You don't have to pressure yourself about remembering every physical feature. We have that. You focus on how you feel and all of the great stories that you have. And these photographs will come to you at the right time. You can pull them out whenever you're ready, and you can look at them, and all of this other stuff is going to come flooding back.
It's kind of like the lost art of conversation, in a sense. Photographs have become that, where it used to be, you could look at a photo and go, oh wow, that moment's been captured. I wasn't even there, and I know exactly what happened. Or even look back.
Yeah.
And say, wow, I completely remember that day, even though it was whatever years ago. Now it's just a click, oh, we got it, bye, let's move on. So I get it. I get it. My daughter, of course, she has her phone, and she's trying to do little artwork, trying to mimic what I'm doing, and she gets frustrated, and by no means am I, anywhere near where you are. I just try to capture a moment with my own dogs and cats and put it into my own little artwork. And she's always like, well, I can't get it like that. It's like, well, this is just my style. You've got to create your own style. Create your own voice. This is just my voice. You have to have your own. She doesn't understand that. She hasn't figured that one out yet, but she will. I'm hoping. But it's like, oh, let me just follow what you're doing. It's like, no. I'm doing this one. We all can have our own creative voice. Just make sure it's quality. Don't just have quantity, have quality. So, yeah, I get that. Out of curiosity, because, I don't know different cameras, I don't know it, so if you put a bunch of letters and numbers and things together, I will tell you, oh, okay, I'm going to be honest right now, I don't know my cameras, but what is your favorite type of camera, and what is your favorite type of lens?
Oh, well, honestly, it depends on what I'm working on, what I'm hoping to create, because they're all so different. I suppose I like the feel of film in my hands, and so any favorite that I would choose would have to be film, although I use digital as well. I do some commercial work, and that needs to be digital, and sometimes people want digital, and I understand that. But I love the bodies. They feel different. And it's more of a multi-sensory experience with film, because there's more sounds that come out of the camera. And there's a bit of the vibration if you feel the film advancing to the next frame. I really like that. My primary film camera is a Canon 1N, and it's old. The nice thing about film is that the equipment lasts darn near forever, and the maintenance is pretty low key. A digital camera body will need to be upgraded in about 5 years because so many things change and the demands of your clients will change. And with film, it's just, film. It just keeps going and going and going. I do really like the 70-200 lens is probably my favorite because when there's room to use it, because it is half the length of one of my legs. I'm not a very big person, but still, it's it's massive. It does such beautiful things with rendering bokeh in the background. That's the little circles of light that happen when the background is out of focus and the subject is in focus. And the speed of that particular lens is amazing, so that we can go from sitting on the sofa to running in the backyard, and I don't have to do a lot of changing up of things. I'm just ready to go.
I can't disagree with you at all. Even though, like I said before, I don't know any of these. I know what a Canon is. I know the brand. And if you would have said it's brand new, I would have believed you. Seriously, I would have. But it's because, I'm one of those just average people who use my camera phone for everything. Yes, I want to capture the moment a lot of times, and I'm going to kind of reveal a little bit with me. I will put it on video with my dogs or my cats, and I will go through the actual play until I get that exact moment, and then I'll screenshot it. But that's all I do. I mean, I don't take, these great elaborate photos. This is just my style. And again, you're an artist when it comes to this. I just try to capture a glimpse where it doesn't probably have as much soul. It doesn't have all of the surroundings. Again, they'll be laying on the couch or laying in bed, and I'm like, ooh, that's a cute little photo. Or my daughter will do the same thing. She'll come up to me, and I love my daughter, but the photos are just absolutely atrocious. And I want to tell her, come on, there's got to be more creativity than that. I don't, but it's like, where's the expression? I mean, I do tell her, where's the expression? What are they saying? What are they trying to tell you? She looks at me like I'm crazy, of course. And she's right. I've said this a few times. But it's like, you got to get the emotions. And that's, if whether you're taking it from, with me, mine is an LG. Wait, yeah, I do have an LG. Okay. Almost forgot for a second there. Or, I have a phone. It's what it is. But I use my phone for those moments. I don't have the elaborate camera. I can only imagine with me. I would be an absolute snob. Because I would be like, no, this is just wrong. This is wrong lighting. This is wrong. Give me a background. I can just. I almost kind of feel like I'd be Austin Powers in a sense. But I get it. I completely get the creativity, and oh boy, which draws up the question: do you like filters, or are you into the natural look?
I like to represent. Well, this is a two-sided thing. So I like to represent things as they are, and so when it comes to color and that kind of stuff, I do want it to be as it is in life. I don't care for the filters that are popular. I just really don't. That's not my style. I don't like the style that's popular now with images being overexposed and way over on the right side of the histogram, meaning that there's a lot of blown out white spaces where there's absolutely no color in the image. It looks too stark to me. I like to embrace real life. And for me, that means things like the big slobber trails that are wrapped around the snout. It means that there are dirty paws. It means that sometimes stuff does get on my lens. Slobbered Lens is a very true story. And that's all part of the moment. And a lot of time, if I'm shooting in film, I'm typically shooting black and white because most of the photographs that I'm producing are meant to be emotional. There needs to be that connection, and color takes that away. It competes for attention. So I do like things to be very natural looking. I want there to be a natural amount of contrast. I don't like the oversaturation or the desaturation. I don't like the hazy filters. I just don't want to mess with that. I want to be able to create the best image that I can in the camera without doing a lot of processing with it. Just what is necessary to bring the image to life.
I can completely agree, and I know what exactly that filter has this it's almost this distorted light kind of wear of what would have been a worn out picture, where the bottom, all the borders are all completely eroded, and I don't like that. I have noticed that, and it's the only thing I can think of is that's this new kind of trend of it's been used, it's been worn type thing, and I just don't understand it. Why do I want an eroded picture? I want to see something that's live. Yeah, I don't get that. I know I've seen that one, and I don't get that. And almost any filter app that you have, they have a ton of those, and you're like, don't want it. Why do I have this? This is pointless.
And yes, it's a style that's popular with a lot of people. I think my big hang up about that is that I've been around the sun enough times to have the opportunity to take in a lot of old photographs where you're looking and you think, what was happening with my hair? Or, ooh, look at those pants. And seeing these things that were trendy and popular at the time that 10 years later or 20 years later or 30 years later just seemed like really bad ideas that were totally based on appearance. And so I don't want to date my work in that way. I don't want to bog it down with stuff that people are going to look at and criticize later because it was a now kind of moment. And with animals, that's so much easier because they're not into the latest bang craze or, the high waist pants now are a thing. Who knew? I feel like I'm in high school again. It's crazy. But yeah, I don't want that to be part of the discussion when people are looking at these images later. I want them to focus on who is the subject here and how do I feel.
Right. You don't want somebody to go, oh my gosh, that must have been 2018. It's just so feels it. I totally get that.
Yeah. Being able to produce something that is timeless in a way, I find this so much more endearing because I also don't want people to look back on these things and think, oh, that was a really regrettable decision. And to use that particular collar or to wear those pants or, so if there's something in the frame that screams, this is 2018, I will rework things so that it's not there.
I completely understand that. What I liked is one of the things, you do have a really cool animated type look that you can put in there. And I love that. I mean, obviously, you know my work, so you've seen what I do. And I look at that, and I look at it, and I go, I love it. But, it's not that, oh, boy, that's so 2018. There is that part where I think we all look at our dogs, we look at our cats as more, they're very, characterized, in a sense they kind of have that cartoonish type personality. So I love the fact that you didn't, shy away from it. You're like, no, I like to go with this. And I know people do enjoy it. So that was a cool thing. But to know that it's mostly natural, which again, like you said, it's timeless. You can't look at it and go, oh boy, that collar, oh boy, what were we thinking back then? Or that haircut. Yeah, we don't have dogs coming in going, oh, I want the latest, trend. You don't get that, which is funny. You could date any photograph back to, oh, look at the hair, look at the clothes. You know when it is. But with this, you wouldn't know. And black and white, you definitely don't know. Color
definitely don't know. And
you still don't know.
Black and white lasts longer.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for something that's going to last your lifetime and longer than that, black and white is the way to go. But for families that do like more of that comical, slightly irreverent approach, and especially that have animal family that have already died that I haven't been able to meet, I just this year started doing pop art graphic portraits of their animals. So I can take some of those older photographs that may not be in the best shape and use them to recreate a digital portrait. So it's kind of comic booky, kind of pop arty, and still paying a lot of respect to who that animal is as an individual. So I don't just take the photograph and reproduce it. I talk with the person. Can you describe what are the 3 most important words, and what kind of adventures did you share together, and what did you learn most from her, and those kinds of things, to create something that really represents the personality of that animal as well as what we see physically, the packaging. And those have been wildly popular because we can do them without a photography session. I can now serve families that live in Montana or New Jersey or Florida without having to travel, and that's pretty cool.
And honestly, that Andy Warhol feel, and personally love that exact style, it's I hate to say timeless, but his work is kind of timeless and has been, incorporated into this pop art type format, and it works. I mean, look who you're talking to about this. I mean, obviously, you can tell that it's where my passion is. But you look at anything that he would have done, it was eccentric, but it was it. You can look at a can of tomato soup, and it still is a can of tomato soup, even though it wasn't brand new. It's not this all of a sudden kind of piece of artwork. It is timeless. And that's where this pop art type style, I don't see how it can go out. It has that trendy, it has that retro, but it's not going to all of a sudden become one of those, oh, it's the 70s, oh, it's the 80s. It's got that feel to, no, this is actually really cool. And like you said, you don't have to, for one, you don't have to go to the location, and your subject doesn't actually have to be of the living, which helps, because a lot of people, they're looking for that, I need something to immortalize my love.
Right.
And some of it is really, in some sense, caricature. That whole pop art feel to it really does express everything. It pops another side that I can't even explain, how it has its own spirit of its own. So I love that.
Yeah, isn't that something? It's such an unexpected way for us to take in visual information. It's a different way of seeing things. And so I think when we're open to seeing things that we may not have noticed in the real life version.
Mm-hmm. And again, dogs, cats, horses, goldfish, birds, they all have a very unique personality, and it really isn't that, it doesn't have to be only, natural or dull,
mm-hmm.
or a rodent picture, which again, I'm going to go on the soapbox with that. I don't like that. I'm going to join you with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of interesting how it's all worked out. And what's interesting is your approach. Your approach is, I need to actually I need to know something. And I imagine even with your subjects, like with the pop art versions, you probably want to know a little bit about your subject. What was this dog or whatever? What was it like?
Mm-hmm.
What was its personality? Because again, color is going to matter. And maybe too much yellow, maybe more green, maybe more whatever. Just, I totally get it. And that's just interesting part. And it's interesting to see that you can grow where I don't think a lot of people can. Or a lot of people just pick up the camera at Best Buy and say, well, I'm a photographer. Kind of frustrating.
And there are so many approaches. There's so many different ways to make a business out of this. And I've never really wanted this to feel like a business. I've never wanted it to feel transactional. I've wanted it to feel like my purpose in life. My purpose being to help people, maybe heal isn't the right word, but to find ways to continue the connection that they have with these incredible animals that have been the most important relationships of their lives. And I've had my own experience with this so many times over, how devastating it is to have that physical void in your life where you don't hear jingling tags, or you're not cleaning the cat box, or you're not mucking the stall in the barn. And it's to be able to see something that doesn't just look like the one you love, but there's something intangible there. Even though it's tangible, there's something intangible there that you just look at it and you think, oh, that's what I miss. And it's still there. We still have this connection. We still have it. And I get to see this every day now.
It's like having the TARDIS on the wall where you can go back in time, or for people who don't pay attention to Doctor Who, then a DeLorean or a phone booth, however you want to look at your time machine, and it just hangs there on the wall. It may not move, but the emotions will never go away. And so I completely get it.
It's like hearing songs on the radio from when you were in third grade, or the year that you had your first child, or the year you graduated from high school, or whatever it is. You know, you hear that song and you're thinking about all the places that you were and what kinds of challenges that you had in your life and how you were feeling at that time and what kinds of clothes you were wearing. You're instantly transported because it's a multi-sensory kind of thing. And you have all of these memories attached to it. And we all benefit from that.
I completely agree. I mean, it's so funny how it's just a quick little thing, whether it's a sound or a photo, just transports us back. And it's like, oh yeah, I completely get it.
Yeah, it's the summer of '69 all over again.
Really? We've gone back? I must be in a future car then. So, hey, cool for me.
I wasn't around in the summer of '69, but I do love the song.
Yeah, I wasn't either. I was still 12 years before I had actually been born. Yeah, I think I did the math correctly. It's later in the day. My brain's not really functioning. Not like it would be normal, but... So what would you think is next for you? What is the next leap that Slobbered Lens is going to do?
Ooh, wow. Well, I have many requests to write a book. I have this thing where I like to preserve the privacy of the families that I serve. And so, unlike a lot of photographers, I'm not hustling back home to post a sneak peek of my fabulous session and, oh, isn't this family adorable? That's not my scene. And those aren't my stories to tell. That's not my family. But what I do share are the stories of my own family and the things that we experience here. So this year, for example, our fourth Dane died, and our eldest cat died just a few weeks ago. And so sharing some of the stories around that is something that I feel is appropriate for me to do. But also telling stories from my perspective, like I'm watching a family and I'm not giving away any information about who they are or what kind of creatures they're living with or what type of circumstance that they're experiencing. But I can tell a lot of what I see about this is part of their daily routine, and here's how much the long-term caregiving is stressing them out. And these are the things that they say that they're going to miss and that kind of thing. So telling these stories in a way such that people can still feel like they're connected to something bigger than they are. So I do that in social media, but I've had so many people ask me to do that in a book so they can just sit down and read a whole bunch of them. The other things would be more teaching. I'm working on getting my first online classes up and ready so that people can do self-study kinds of things. I've been teaching phone photography and SLR photography, both film and digital, and that's been wonderful. I've been mentoring other photographers. That's also been wonderful. Expanding that a little bit more, I think, is in the works for the second part of this year. It really, my teaching is so much more centered on families because I want them to be confident in creating their own visual memories without feeling like they have to hire somebody to come into their home. There's always going to be a place for someone like me to come in and do work. But for the everyday stuff, when you're taking out your phone and you know that you've learned that the best camera is the one that you have in your hand, and you know what features that has and how to use it, so you can make really stunning images. That small kind of thing can change life for a lot of people, and that's the kind of stuff that I really want to deliver.
It's funny. I've heard so many people come around and they're like, I think a book is on the horizon, and it's like, you know what? I cannot disagree with your logic. It makes sense, and maybe maybe some kid will pick it up and go, I really want to go into photography, and all of a sudden you just been able to guide this young mind into a profession they didn't even know they wanted to be in, and now because of your work, that's what they're going to do, and they'll be good at it. So that's really cool.
Yeah. And it's such a different side of things because it's not the shiny photography life that a lot of people are interested in. I do very little studio work. Most of the time when I'm with families, they're crying a lot. Sometimes I'm present for euthanasia. So that there's huge emotions involved in this. And then when I go back to deliver the photographs, there's even bigger emotions involved in that because they're seeing what their love looks like, sometimes for the first time through someone else's perspective. And it's hard, and it requires tremendous emotional skills, being able to be with vulnerable people that way and not to shut myself off and to participate in feeling all of that stuff. But what a beautiful thing it is to be invited to be with someone in that space and to be able to reflect back to them that this is a really crappy situation, and I know you are preparing yourself, you're steeling yourself for this tremendous heartbreak that you can't even imagine. And I'm just so glad to be here because years from now, this day what we create this day is going to help you. And that, I can't ask for more than that.
I can't disagree. I mean, again, creativity is not something that you can learn. So it's something that you either have or you don't have. And it's like just taking a photo is easy, but capturing that moment, that's what takes the creativity. And, you know, there's definitely, like you said, there's a need and a need that will never go away. Again, you can take, anybody could take a photo, but, you know, how many times have we mentioned blurry photos, bad lighting? It happens. And again, not everybody's going to have that mindset of, oh gosh, this is just not the right place to take this photo, or maybe my iPhone 5 is just not going to take the right photo. So yeah, I get it. And you know, like you mentioned, again, you have the unfortunate task of capturing a moment right before the end of a life, and you have to capture the good in it, where the actual family, it would be almost impossible to capture that. You have to have somebody on the outside be able to come in and go, okay, I got this. I'm going to get every ounce of it. I'm going to get your emotions, the animal's emotions, and we're going to timeline it. We're going to timestamp it, and it's going to be a moment in time that will last forever, which you can't do it when you're in that moment. You have to be separated from it. So, totally get it. Is there anything that we didn't cover that we should have, or we should cover?
I don't know. I think we covered loads and loads.
That's usually the goal.
I never know what's going to be interesting to people, because it's, you know, as we were talking about earlier, when you're really married to expressing a certain viewpoint or following an agenda, sometimes there's a lot of missed opportunity there. So I just make myself open to whatever people want to talk about it.
That's usually how I am. Let everybody know how they can find you, because I'm sure everybody's kind of going, okay, well, I know it's Slobbered Lens, but how do I find her?
Oh, yes. Well, cleverly, it's at slobberedlens.com, and that's spelled exactly how it sounds. And you can also find me on Facebook at Slobbered Lens, also exactly as it sounds. And I don't do other kinds of social media because I just don't want to.
I understand that too.
That's why.
Because dogs and cats can't Facebook. That's why. That's the simple side.
Yes, but you're more than welcome to send me emails. My contact information is on the website and on Facebook. You can send me a Facebook message or come and stalk me on my page, or whatever you feel is appropriate. If you are looking for a photographer in your area that does end-of-life kind of photography, I can point you to some resources where you can find out more about that and maybe connect with someone that's close to you. If you have any questions about things like hospice care, animal hospice, that's becoming more and more prevalent. I know a lot of people in that field as well, and I can get you started on looking at some resources that can help you and your family.
I couldn't have said it any better. And of course, you can always look in the description page and see a lot more. And you can look on our Facebook page, which I will be tagging you into the actual list, so they can go right there and not have to worry about trying to figure out everything. Because again, you know, time is just something we're all short on. Well, Shannon, thank you for being on the podcast. Come back anytime. You know that you don't have to ask. You just say, hey, I want to come back, and I will definitely have you back on. And again, it's been an absolute pleasure being able to kind of have that creative talk with you. And, you know, again, it's a unique kind of world that we're in. We see things a little bit different. And you're able to capture it for people on a daily basis, which is very rewarding.
That's a good place to be. And thank you for inviting me. This was a wonderful discussion, Chris.
it really has been fun. Well, I'm Chris Green. Have a pet-tastic week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay, gotta go in my bedtime.